Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for our ELEM sponsored self-care event. Hitting the pause button, identifying anxiety and recalibrating our response. My name is Vanessa. I'm a development officer at ELEM, and I'll be moderating today's talk, but mostly letting the speakers do the talking as they are the ones we want to hear from. I'd like to take a moment to thank our speakers today. Dr. Zeccola, thank you so much for donating your time and for being here with us and sharing some of your wisdom on anxiety and how to cope. It's been a very difficult time for everyone during this pandemic, and it just feels like it keeps getting longer and longer. So I'm sure many people still need some coping tools to help us get through this. And Lenore Ruben, president of ELEM US, thank you so much for participating in this event and for sharing some information about this amazing organization, ELEM, for those who are not familiar with the work. On behalf of all of us, Lenore, at ELEM, I want to thank you for your leadership and guidance over the years in both ELEM Israel and ELEM US. Your commitment to at-risk youth in Israel is beyond measure, and we would not be here today if it weren't for you. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. I'd like to make a few announcements about Zoom for those of you who are new to Zoom. Make sure you've got the speaker view selected on the upper right corner of your screen so that you see the person who is speaking at all times. That'll help you follow the conversation. We will have a Q&A following our speakers. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. There's a chat feature on the bottom center of your screen. So if any questions come up during the talk, just feel free to type them in there and I will get to your questions once our Q&A starts, which we'll do after Dr. Zeccola speaks. If you did not register for this event, welcome, and please use the chat feature now to enter your first name. We can keep in touch and let you know about future events that we have planned. We are doing a lot of programming now, and we'd love to stay in touch with you and let you know about our events. And with that, to Lenore Ruben, president of ELEM US. Lenore, we'd love to hear from you. Okay, there you go.
I'm here, yes. I'm also not the most technologically savvy, but I'm getting there. And I want to welcome everybody for joining us this afternoon and to learn more about ELEM and to learn more about how to manage in these very stressful times we're living in and how this all spills over to our kids and our children's stresses and how to handle stresses with them. First, a little bit about my background with ELEM and then about my background. I've been involved with ELEM for, I'm not even sure how many years, I think about 18 years, but give or take a few, I'm not even certain. I became involved with ELEM through ELEM's founder, Anne Jaclyn, and real leader of this organization for many years. And that was, she was my neighbor, she still is my neighbor, and little by little got more and more involved. And never look back when I see the need of what really is taking place in Israel. It's just mind-blowing what Anne has been able to create and develop, and the sad part is that the need keeps growing. We keep growing with the needs, but it's a never-ending race. So with that, what ELEM does is we have over 42 programs. Sorry, correct me on the numbers.
82 programs in about 42 cities. Yeah.
82 programs in 42 cities. Thank you very much. I had that inside out and I knew I did. This is the dyslexia in me. But we work with 122,000 kids last year. 100,000 of them are on our online programs and chat rooms. We work with in the online realm in various blogs, chat rooms, various methods, social media for 12 years. So we are really ahead of that curve. It's not something we're just now jumping onto, but something that has exploded with COVID. We have found 400% increase in needs and use for online programs. And in addition to our online programs, we have Hafu Kalafuks, which are drop-in coffee houses where kids can come. They don't have to give their names. They can come in, they can get one-on-one counseling, they can get information, they can get group counseling, or they can just come and hang out and know that they have a safe place to come to and never get counseling. Just from being in a wholesome environment where they know they can get some food, they can get some shelter, that's enough to keep them out of harm and off the streets. We have other programs with shelters where we offer beds so kids can sleep, as well as get counseling. We are working with everything from sexual abuse, physical abuse, domestic abuse, verbal abuse of every nature. We are working with kids who have been thrown out of the house, kids who have run away from the house. We are working with every ethnic group, every religion imaginable. So we're working with the Bedouins, we're working with the Druze, we're working with the Jewish people, we're working with the Arabs, the Christians. We're working with anybody who's in the streets from age 9 to realistically till 25, although technically it's a little bit less than that. But this is the parameters that we work with. And we are working with sexual abuse, and from both the abuser's side as well as the one who is being abused. So we are the largest organization in Israel in this sector. And we are the only organization in Israel that does not work by referrals. Well, we do get some referrals, but we don't turn anybody away for any reason. If you're a young person, a youth, a kid in need, ELEM is your address. And the kids all know it. They know it from word of mouth. They know it from mass media campaigns in Israel. They know it from schools, because we also have programs, the Shluch programs, which are inside the school systems themselves. The schools have recognized our work is so important to keeping kids in school that they've invited us into some of their schools. We've been invited to more of the schools, but money is holding us back from being in more schools. We have outreach vans that are actually roaming the streets or sitting in the parks from 10 at night until 2 in the morning, sitting with the kids where they are, whether it's at a rave party, whether it's in a park, whether it's on the beach, wherever it is, we are where the kids are. And we start with them there. And there are some newer programs who are doing this now as well, but on a very small basis. And they really are focusing on specific populations. For ELEM, everybody is our population. If you're in need, we are there. We also work with programs, we have programs for kids who are looking for vocational help. And so we have Derech HaMelech, and we have programs where we work with the kids to develop skill sets that will take them off of the streets. And we have programs where we work with the youth probation system, where we go into the system with kids 6 months before they're about to be released, and we work out an exit strategy with them. And we have apartments, and we have volunteers and professionals who work with these kids. We don't put them back into the same environment that got them into trouble in the first place. And we work with them in developing the skills and getting their GEDs and doing whatever needs to until they can be on their feet, and then they're on their own. So they're not lost, so they're not back in the system. And that, these programs combined have created a 50% reduction in recidivism back into the probation system. So, I mean, this is just an overview of some of the programs that we have. We have so many more. Could talk for hours about all the details and fine tuning of what ELEM is and what ELEM does. We are very holistic, very full encompassing. Our goal is to reach the kids where they are. And it's a very serious problem in Israel. I mean, according to the government numbers and statistics, 1/3 of Israeli youth population, that's kids under the age of 18, are considered to be on the at-risk spectrum. And at-risk spectrum sometimes for food insecurity, homelessness, drugs in the family, drug abuse in themselves, for any number of reasons, abuse of various types, being a first generation, having to take care of parents from, who immigrated, who don't have skills and don't have the jobs and may not have the language, cultural. I mean, there's 1,000,001 reasons, but 1/3 of the youth of Israel are considered on the at-risk spectrum. And on that at-risk spectrum, there are 5 stops along the way, from mildly, at risk, troubled teens, but more of your more typified teenage angst stuff, to self-harm, self-mutilation, homelessness on the street, prostitution, major issues. Sometimes psychiatric, many times not. So it's a whole gamut. And the 2 most severe cases on the at-risk spectrum is the fastest growing demographic. So that's pretty scary to think about. What's the future youth of Israel? So, which is why I believe firmly ELEM's work is super important. There must be intervention. There must be help. The government needs to do more, and they are trying to do more. I must say, from what they have done in the past to what they're doing now is tremendously important and a big, huge improvement. But it's still a big problem. And the problem with the government is that they can say, okay, we've contracted, we've promised you this money for this program, but we have to divert the money for security purposes. We're about to go into war, there's something happening. Or we can not get the money on time because there's no vote confidence in government and they freeze all the spending. So it's an issue. We've always gotten the money in the end from the government. They've never stiffed us, but they can pay us 18 months, 2 years late, and we still have to pay our landlords and our workers, and we have our own overhead, and we're not allowed to be a day late by Israeli law. We get fines that will double every day. So, so that's a problem. That's why they really depend on the monies that we can raise. They depend on our resources. They depend on our support. And like I explained, it's super important, I feel, that we give them the support because of the growing populations and needs. Moving on a little bit to my own background. I am trained as a special education teacher first, then as a clinical social worker who specialized in trauma care. I'm a nationally board certified hypnotherapist who worked with the American Red Cross in 9/11, doing triage work and doing trauma care of families and people involved with 9/11. I've worked in psychiatric hospitals as well as had my own clinic for years, specializing in attention deficit disorder and learning disabilities and working with families and schools in need. So that's a little bit of my own personal background. So my shoe-in with ELEM, you can see where there's a balance. And with that, I'd like to pass this back to Vanessa, or am I passing this?
Yes.
Where am I passing this? Okay, I'm passing this back to
You're
Vanessa.
right.
And I just want to thank you again for joining us today, and hope that we can give you some highlights as to best practices and suggestions on how to live through these difficult times that we're living in now.
Thank you so much, Lenore. That was great. That was a really great overview of what ELEM does as an organization and the various services that we provide to the various communities that we serve. So thank you for that. And I will pass it on now to Dr. Zeccola, who's here to talk about anxiety and coping with anxiety. And take it away, Dr. Zeccola.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to hear about the organization. I've known bits, but it's to hear that whole synopsis was really nice, and the work that you do is so important. So I'm really glad to be here today and be some small part of the work that you do. I am a clinical psychologist in private practice in Los Angeles. In addition to my practice, I work as a clinical coordinator of a preschool for children with special needs. Many are on the spectrum or have sensory challenges, attachment disorders. It runs the gamut. And we work with families. And that's a lot of my work in my private practice too. So it's a little bit about me. In addition, I wanted to start with that because my two different spaces from where I work tend to collide a lot, especially in COVID times. And so it's a nice sort of self-disclosure, I guess, but also starting point from where I'm coming to today and how what I'm going to talk to you about really does work in practice. So my typical day has shifted a little bit this week because our school is now open and we are welcoming families and children on site. And as clinical coordinator and as the training coordinator, I have to be there whenever our interns are there. So I was there this morning. I also have a small child who will be starting preschool next week, but right now is not. And so he was with me at the school, and then our babysitter lives in South Central. So those of you who are not from LA, the sort of regional stuff won't make a lot of sense, but she lives about 20 minutes away from us without any traffic. That never happened. So she lives about 50 minutes away from us. And because of COVID, our preference is that she not take public transportation. So we pick her up and drop her off each day. So my day today involved going to the school, going to pick up the babysitter, bringing the babysitter and the baby home, coming here to my office. And in all of that, and why I'm bringing this up, how my psyche works is that's how I get sped up. That's how I start to feel anxious, when I have all of these different things that I have to connect and make work. And then I start to worry about, is all of it going to happen? Am I going to get places on time? Because being late is a huge source of anxiety for me. So a really lived experience this morning is what I'm trying to say. And why I think this idea of slowing down or hitting the pause button is so important. And I do want to also say, Scott and I will be in sort of conversation during this in terms of slides. So forgive that little non-technical intrusion, but I think it'll work out really well. So when Vanessa asked me to talk about something about self-care, it happened to be during a week where this topic came up a lot in each of my individual sessions. And I think, and Lenore, to your point, I think that COVID times really are amplifying anxiety to a degree that people who have experienced anxiety in their life haven't felt this level as a baseline, and people who've never felt anxiety are all of a sudden anxious and aren't sure how to manage it. So I think it's a really hopefully important and useful tool. So Scott, if you wouldn't mind pulling up I guess the second slide. So we can go past the title slide into the little description of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So this might be a reminder for many of you. This might be new information, but our brain has three actually different wings of the nervous system that do different things. And the two that are important for today's talk are the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Without getting too into the biology, the sympathetic nervous system is the part of your brain that sort of helps you be able to fight or flee if there's something to be worried about. It helps you in terms of anything that procreation. It helps you with things where that aren't calm, essentially. And how it does that is it slows down the other parts of your body. So it accelerates your heart rate because you need your blood to flow, because you need to be able to run. And but it slows down your salivary glands. It doesn't allow for anything that would fall under the category of metabolism. And I'm using that word specifically because thought and being able to think require the ability to metabolize ideas, require the ability to digest what is going on, take it in, and let it sort of have space to be worked through. And when we're in worry or panic, our body sort of shuts down that ability. And it's this interesting combination of the somatic, so our feeling state, our body, what our body is doing, and our brain. And so one could kick in and tell the other one that something's wrong, right? So if you're running and your heart rate is going very quickly, you could know, okay, that's happening because I'm running. But it could also make you worry for a second. Uh-oh, my heart rate's going, there's something to worry about, right? So when these systems kick in, it doesn't really matter which starts, but what happens is there's a cycle. So now my body is telling me that there's something to worry about, and my brain is telling me there's something to worry about, and there must be something to worry about. And the parasympathetic nervous system is that part of our brain that comes in and calms everything down and allows us to be able to breathe again. It expands our ability to take in air. It opens up that digestive process. And in what I'm going to talk about is how to sort of engage your parasympathetic nervous system on purpose. So to be able to tell yourself, there's nothing really to worry about. We don't have to run. And we can think about what's going on. Doesn't mean that there isn't something that's real that's happening. It just means that whatever's happening, I still want to have the ability to think about this. And how this helps with parenting is, it's the sort of old adage, right? You put on your oxygen mask first. If you're panicking, if you're worried, if you're sped up, if you're moving really fast, your kids are going to be too. And I think something that has happened in COVID times is that, I'm sure many of you either are experiencing this or have friends or family that are experiencing this. Everyone is at home at the same time together, trying to do the things that they would do away from home. And so your kids are in school. School is stressful. Even when it's fun, it can be stressful. There's social stuff, there's all of that. And their worry turns into your worry, and your worry turns into their worry. And all of a sudden, everybody is on edge. And it's very hard to find that space to think. So if we can go to the next slide. So that's sort of the why now piece, right? Now, especially, is a time where if we can engage this slowing down, this thinking space, then we can engage our parasympathetic nervous system, actually feel things open up, actually feel the ability to sort of digest stuff, and then make decisions. Again, it doesn't mean that whatever you're worried about is nonsense. There's a lot to be worried about. I mean, we're in a pandemic. And so there's, there's a lot to be worried about. There's been political unrest. There's been, all sorts of real scary things. People have had financial challenges based on this. Many families are experiencing loss. So there's very real things to worry about. But slowing down will enable you to be able to think about it and then be able to manage those feelings better. So the next slide. So that's my little slow down totem animal. And I love the sloth because in normal, in real world, you can't be the sloth. Like, sloth doesn't have many survival skills that I know of. I don't know a lot about sloths, so I could be wrong about that. But the sloth is, he's really is just there to sort of eat and sleep. And it really is the sort of the example of digest. Take this in and digest. So the sloth is not going to get me to this talk on time. There has to be other animals engaged, but the sloth is going to help me when I'm worried 10 minutes before I have to log on to remember that I can take a breath. So next slide. So then here is the, it's really simple, and it's really not easy to do. Is when you feel yourself getting sped up. So I'm in my car and I just dropped the babysitter and the baby off, and I'm driving here to my office, and I'm feeling myself, my heartbeat is going faster. My breathing is a little bit more shallow. My stomach is churning a little bit. I'm worried. I'm feeling really anxious. The first step is to slow down. And what I do, and I'm not saying that this is what everyone needs to do, is what I do is I say it out loud. I have an acting background. So when I was an actor, I had a coach, and I don't know if this is at all good advice, but it resonated with me. And a coach told me, if you go to an audition and you're nervous, just say you're nervous and then do the audition, right? Like, speak the feeling, and then it gives it less power. It's out here now. It's not just in here. Right? So I will say to myself, oh, I'm feeling anxious. I'm worried. And then take deep breaths. And this image really speaks to me because, and Lenore, this might be something that you're very familiar with. I remember my dad was a hypnotherapist, and he used to talk about the upside down tree as sort of imagery for our lungs, and really filling in all of the branches. And so when I saw this, that I remembered him talking about that, and it really, I think it's a great visual.
I also, to add to what you're saying, I always tell people, like when I'm coaching, like for people for public speaking, who are anxious or stage fright, as you're talking about, I say, never run onto the stage. Get up slowly, take your time. Pretend you've got all the time in the world. Make them wait for you. It's okay. Make them wait for you, because if you run up fast, it's going to speed you up, and then you're going to get really anxious.
Yeah.
Take your time, breathe, enjoy the moment. So what? Relax. And this, tends to help people as well. And in terms of the anxiety that you may feel, oh, I'm going to be late and this, whatever, I'm running around like a Looney Tune, you see those cartoons, right? Stop. Again, like a cartoon, just stop. Say, what am I doing? It'll be what it'll be. Take a deep breath and move on slowly. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you'll recognize that you're breathing more deeply, and that you can carry on, and that the earth isn't going to open up and swallow you whole if you're 2 minutes late, 5 minutes late. It's okay. I mean, it's not ideal. You want to be on time. Of course, you're not aiming to be, but there are things in the universe that are out of our control. If there's a car accident, I can't move. I can't go backwards. I can't go forwards. What am I going to do? You're going to enjoy the moment, turn on a book on tape and say, oh, I got some downtime. Find the silver lining is the other thing in helping to deal with this. Always say, okay, whatever the problem is, whatever's making me anxious, there's something good about it. I'm going to learn something about this. And that's going to make it worthwhile.
Yeah. I think that last piece is so true, especially for families right now. I think for parents, so many parents that I'm working with who are in distress, and it's real distress over their children's schooling and worrying about a lost year, or worrying about all of a sudden really realizing how challenging some subjects are for their kids. And the silver lining, or the lemonade, or for these families, not all families, but is this opportunity to really slow down together and to really take the power away, right? So what? So what if your kid repeats second grade? Like, I'm not saying that lightly. I'm saying that with knowing that that would be a hard thing. But is it harder for your child to leave this year feeling awful about themselves? Or is it okay for everybody to decide, you know what, there's, to your point, Lenore, there's not a lot that we can control here, but what we can control is how we're going to react to the fact that this is really hard. It is really hard for you to learn how to read on Zoom. So we're going to do the best we can, and then we're going to see what happens, right? And that sort of modeling for children, that modeling, that idea of walking slowly onto the stage, or that idea of taking your time and asking that, in therapy that we talk about Socratic questions, right? Like this idea of like, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? If you are 5 minutes late, then what? And so infrequently is the answer, someone's going to die, right? And if it's not someone's going to die, or, then can you lower the stakes? It might be uncomfortable, it might be really hard, you might feel badly, but can you lower the stakes so that it doesn't feel catastrophic? Because our panic, our anxiety, our anxious mind wants to tell us that something catastrophic is happening. So the real sort of slow down of this is slow down, take some breaths that really fill up your body, right? Let yourself feel those breaths go in and deep, because that'll also help, again, that parasympathetic nervous system kick in, and your heart rate will slow down. You will feel different. And I will often tell people to commit to 2 minutes a day, no matter what's going on, to sit, to put their feet on the ground, and to breathe into their chest, so that when they need this, they've already got this practice established, that this is, it's like a fire drill. You want to know that, oh yeah, I know how to stop myself, whatever I'm doing, I know how to stop myself, center myself, and breathe. And I know that will help right now. And again, it's not to say that whatever you're worrying about isn't worth worrying about. It might be, but in order to worry about it, and in order to think about it, you need to slow yourself down and not be in panic. We cannot think in panic. If we go back to that sympathetic nervous system, the nervous system slide. That's it. So our body, our biology is not set up to allow us to think in panic. There's only one part of our brain that's engaged, and that's the part of our brain that says, get out, go, find a safe place to be, get there as quickly as possible. And so again, that slowing down, that breathing, you can become your own safe place. And then you can think. And that's it. That's what I've got. I'm open to any questions or any conversation around this.
Well, I can add a little bit to this then. I mean, another thing to remember is that when you're dealing with stress, anxiety, it can produce also anger and more argument in a household, and more like you're at your limits. And so it's something that I counsel people all the time. And I love the idea of taking a deep breath and having that sort of be part of your repertoire, tool in your toolkit, but also humor.
Mhm.
Recognition that we're all in the same boat here, and we're all keeping above water. So one of the things that I recommend people, whatever comedian you like, whatever makes you laugh, whether it's playing with a puppy or a baby, whatever it is, something that's going to give you a good belly laugh every day. And you got to start to work on the humor. Crying is a good release. Screaming is a good release, which is part of the reason why we get angry at each other, because it gives us a chance to scream. Although it doesn't always work when you're screaming at somebody who's not taking it so well. They're not in the same place. So you may want to do that elsewhere, take your screaming someplace else. But so does humor, laughter. These are all biological, physiological releases of this stress. Another release of the stress is exercise, something that's hard for us to do. But again, it's a way for our body to exhaust this stress that is being built up inside of us, whether it's going for a walk, which is a good way to clear your head. Doesn't have to be, I'm going to go run a marathon type thing, or, starting to weight lift, 10,000 pounds, but something that is going to bring you enjoyment that you can do on a regular basis that's going to clear your head. That's self-help. That's something for you, as opposed to always doing for others. I think one of the things that I see regularly, but I see even more exasperated with COVID and lockdowns and being, cooped up with our families, is particularly with women or single parent households, you feel like you're giving and you're giving and you're giving and you're giving until you feel completely empty. Like, I have nothing left to give. And that's because you didn't give to yourself. You can't keep emptying the vessel without something filling it up. So self-care is not selfish. Self-care is extremely important for yourself, of course, but for everybody else around you. Everybody needs to take time for self-care and not feel guilty about it. It's important.
Yeah, I mean,
And to give yourself that permission is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, it goes back to the, what do we tell new parents all the time? You've got to sleep when the baby sleeps, right? And how many new parents do it? But really, in order to be a role model and a healthy role model for your children, you need to model self-care, because it's the only way we learn about it. So in addition to what you're saying in terms of your own sort of functioning day to day, it's also for our children to see, and Michelle, this rolls into your question, right? That to see how you manage stress is how they're going to manage stress. So if you are who gets panicked and runs and starts yelling and screaming and throwing things and whatever, that's going to be their model, right? So Michelle, I have a question. How old are your children?
Can we read Michelle's question first so everyone knows what we're responding? Here, the question is for Michelle. Can you suggest some things to say to kids to get them to calm down? Something visual so they don't feel weird.
It's actually not my kids specifically, because my kids are grown, but I'm in charge of the religious school and they feel anxious.
Yeah.
So you can see it.
But what age children are we talking about?
Everything from 4-year-old to B'nai Mitzvah, pre-B'nai Mitzvah, like 12, 13. So most of them, if you say deep breath, the first thing you'd get is an eye roll. They might do it, but they feel weird. They're not going to do it. And it's not going to have the calming effect that we as adults know it can do. So I'm trying to apply because I am very lucky. I get great self-care. I want my kids in the religious school.
Yeah.
to do something that they feel comfortable doing when I can see them in class getting.
So I would still go back to modeling that. Like if something's getting stirred up, the first thing I would do is, as the adult, I would take a deep breath and I would announce it. I'm going to slow down for a minute.
Just like yawning, when somebody starts to yawn, other people around start to yawn too. Similarly, that happens with deep breathing.
Yeah.
And I would exaggerate it for them to deep breathe and just let it all go. And I would start every class and maybe even end every class with a minute or 2 or 3, depending what you can afford time-wise, with some sort of physical exercise that ends in breathing and letting it go. And when I tell, like I'll work with like children, I'll say, okay, let's be flopsy mopsies, let's be hanging around and flipping around. And, I make games out of it and do it as a collective. And when it becomes part of the routine, they know when they get to this class, we're gonna have some fun time in the beginning to sort of get ourselves collected. And they don't know that's what the goal is. This is what they just think it's something fun, a fun game we're gonna do. And I've got all sorts of games and ways to accomplish this, and storylines and visualizations. But you're working with getting the body working and moving, and even if it's just an open dance time, put on some music and just let them shake it all out. And then we take a collective exhale. And you can end on that. And what I thought, well, you can't do this nowadays because unless you're in person, I don't know what the rules are, how 6 feet apart everything is or whatever. But before COVID, because when I work in psychiatric facilities and such, and I teaching there, and when I trained other teachers to do from my clinic, is when you see this happening, when you've gotten into a rhythm and a routine, you'll see the body language starting to happen before the kid knows it's going to happen. And you just put your hand on the kid's shoulder, and the kid will just, it becomes instinctive. You put hands here, and you walk on. And you'll see a change in behavior.
Yeah. I think Lenore just modeled something that's really valuable too, is slowing down your rate of speech. So if they're getting sped up, so it's less do this thing, kids, but it's more showing and creating the space within the room. Really slowing down that rate of speech can be really helpful for slowing down distress. And the other thing that I'm a huge fan of, and depending on the age, you're going to do it differently, but is narration. So to also give context, right? So you notice your 4-year-olds are getting, there's a 4-year-old who's really upset. You can say, oh, we were on the floor and we were reading a story, and then it was time to get up and go, do our art project, and you weren't ready yet. And you got really worried that you weren't going to have time with the story or something. I'm making it up, but to really give context so that you're creating the frame for which they think about, oh, that makes me worried, right? It's not going to happen that day, but eventually you're helping them to know their brain. And with the older kids, you can do it too, with the bar mitzvah kids, oh, you guys all just went, you just went to, Sandy's bar mitzvah, and you're all thinking about what is it going to be like when I'm on the pulpit? Like I'm so worried about it. And that's why we're here. We're here to practice, and we're here to prepare. And that's why we're here. And those feelings are so normal, right? So you're just giving sort of context, and you're not, and I think the most damaging thing that we do as adults, and we do it because we love and we hate to see people in distress, is we say there's nothing to worry about, right? You want to say, yeah, that's a big worry. And that's why we're here. That's why we're together. That's why we have this time. I get it. Ugh, so much anxiety around your bat mitzvah, right? But so anyway, those are two things that I just wanted to add to what Lenore was saying.
Yeah, and generally speaking, I love that you said that. Generally speaking, fastest way to get somebody more upset and more anxious is to say there's nothing to worry about. Never tell an anxious person there's nothing to worry about. Because then they start going anxious and crazy. Am I crazy? Am I going to loony bin? They can put me in, you know, it builds and it builds and it builds. You have to acknowledge what's in front. You start where they are. You're anxious. You're upset. I can see that. And part of what, you know, I spent years doing was, yes, putting things in context, but a lot of my population work with, we had to work to get to that stage. We had to first get to the stage of where in your body do you feel this? How do you know you're anxious? They didn't have the vocabulary. They would never say they're anxious or not. They'd say, I can see that something's not right because I see your fist clenching, I see your jaw clenching, or I see your speech changing, or I see your breathing changing, or I see your posture changing. And that told me that you didn't look like you were ready to make that change. Or he says, so can you tell me what you were feeling, to sort of to put it somatically, to put it into their body so they can start making connections from the speech, the vocabulary, to the feeling, to what is happening in their body when they feel that. And then they can start to feel more in control of these feelings, and that they can, oh, I can manage this. I understand this. I know what this is.
So important. And something we, I'm hearing myself. Oh, okay. And something that we say with some of the younger kids to, you know, the language that I use is, you know, oh, I see your body getting fast. I wonder if you have a worry, right? I see you really, you're moving around a lot. I wonder if you're worried about something. I wonder, not I know. I don't know your brain, but I'm curious. Is there something going on that's giving you this fast feeling? This, you know, this clenched up feeling, this, you know, you sort of, you put even the opposite. Like I saw you put your head down and you got really like quiet, and I wonder what's going on. I wonder what your thinking is or what your feeling is, right? Yeah. Because so
Exactly.
often
Validate the person.
Yeah.
Any more questions? I don't see any in the chat, but if someone wants to jump in, feel free. We have a few more minutes. Don't be shy. Well, I think this, what we just talked about, basically anxiety being normal, right? This is a normal thing. We all experience this. This is not something to be embarrassed about or shy about or afraid to express. Michelle was saying she hates it when people tell her to calm down. So acknowledging and accepting that as a reality. In the same way, it reminds me of ELEM and something that Lenore has mentioned in our conversations, how we meet the youth where they are. Where they are is perfect, and that's where we meet them, and that's where we're going to step in and do what we can. As she said, there's the at-risk spectrum. So some people are going to suffer from more minor issues like, you know, bullying, anxiety, depression, and then there's the more severe, right? As she was talking, I mean, as she said, we serve kids on the spectrum. So all the way from anxiety, bullying, depression to, you know, eating disorders, prostitution, homelessness, attempted suicide, sexual abuse, both victims and perpetrators. So, you know, where you are is fine, and we do what we can to help you at exactly that place where you're at. And I think it's this acceptance, this unconditional acceptance that is so new for the youth that we serve. It's something that they haven't experienced before. And I think that's what makes ELEM special. And why we've had so much success and why we've grown exponentially in Israel. In Israel, ELEM is a household name. Everyone knows what ELEM is. You probably know someone in your family or in your network that volunteers or knows a volunteer or, you know, has seen the outreach vans. So it definitely is, you know, it really has grown and it is very, people know about ELEM in Israel. And, you know, with COVID, of course, it was such a drastic adjustment. So such a sudden and dramatic adjustment to our lives. And as we've all had to adjust to this new reality, LM also had to adjust. At first, we weren't able to do our work. The lockdown in Israel was very strict. My mom was telling me she couldn't, they were like, they could only go 500 meters from their home. And you know, people, cops would come up to them on the street and ask for the address and proof of identity and see where they are, where they live, to make sure they weren't breaking those rules. But, you know, we didn't give up at ELEM, and with some chutzpah and persistence, we actually got the government to grant us essential worker status. And ELEM has been working through the pandemic, providing all the services we normally provide. On top of it, we even added services. We're feeding the hungry, which is something we haven't done in the past. And I'm so sorry. I think Michelle did have a question. Sorry, Michelle, did you have a question? I'm being told you have a question.
Well, the only reason I'm a practical kind of person, so I had a practical question, so I didn't mean to cut you off on LM. That's why I wanted to just politely. So the question I have is, oftentimes, or we've started meeting with the older kids, trying to solve what's making them anxious. Do the kids usually not want that? Because from talking to them, some of their time is spent doing things that don't contribute to well-being, or maybe it does, making a TikTok for an hour and a half when they're stressed and staying up till 2 in the morning studying and waking up at 7 to go to school. Do you just kind of not talk about that? Do you?
No, I mean, I always say behavior is communication. So I think, like, I love that you're thinking, you know, TikTok could possibly be a way that they are managing their anxiety, because it probably is, right? Kids find amazing ways to cope. And then it's our job to sort of give that language and give that a frame, and then give them different coping skills, right? So we see this so much, at least I see this so much with the population that I work with Minecraft, where kids can get lost for hours in Minecraft. But Minecraft is a really good way to have to shut off your worries and just focus on this task of building this town, of mining and whatever, right? Like, it's very specific. So yeah, I don't think the goal is ever to not talk about it. And especially teens, they're going to be really, really convincing that you shouldn't. I think the goal is, again, to model as much as you can. And then also to say, you know, I see I see what you're doing on TikTok, and it's really cool. And also, I wonder if it's a way that you don't have to think about what you're worried about, right? Again, not pathologizing it, but seeing like, oh, I'm noticing this, and I'm wondering if this is what you're doing. And maybe we can think about some other ways, other tools you can use too. Here are some things that work, right?
I completely agree with everything you've just said, but I think that in addition to that, like, I know with my own grandchildren, I see this, you know, because we're all living in one house. And I see, particularly with the 2 older ones, who's 11 and 8, they haven't been able to socialize with their friends really on any regular basis. I have play dates or all the typical stuff, and they're very athletic, and so all the after school stuff that they used to do. Even they're in small little pods now, they're not in their bigger groups, and their whole social life and ability to interact with their peers, you know, it's really been really badly impacted. So Minecraft has really been a tremendous social outlet for them, because it's something that they're doing not just by themselves, but they're interacting. I mean, I hear them out here in the room next to where I am, and they have the headphones on, and they're talking to their friends, and they're laughing, and they're throwing on, and they're saying, I'm going to build this for you. I mean, you know, they're having the whole things in the whole world, and they're working out anxieties together, and which can be very powerful. TikTok platform, I'm less familiar with. I don't think it is as interactively social like that. It is more of a, you know, an individual thing, that putting it out there for the world. So I would look at that a little bit differently. But the kids to play some of these socially minded interactive games I think it's been a lifesaver for them, because otherwise they're really just like shut off, and is seeing depression and things starting to seep in to the kids. So anxiety in kids will often show up as depression, withdrawal, fearfulness, actually with adults too, not wanting to get out of bed. All of a sudden it's like, what am I getting out of bed for? What's out there? Can't go anywhere. It's, these things go hand in hand. So sometimes it's a negative retreat, but sometimes it's a very positive, healthy retreat. So I wouldn't paint one broad brushstroke over the whole concept of it. Would have to sort of look at it case by case as to what's happening and figure out why. And then again, to model other alternatives. If something is going, it isn't as beneficial for the individual as it could be, to start offering alternatives, suggesting alternatives, creating other options for the person to choose. You can't force it down them. You can't say, I'm taking this away. You're going to get rebellion, and you're going to get a lot of resistance. But if you start offering, oh, but I got a better piece of cake over here, and start giving them options, that tends to work, especially with teenagers. Teenagers, just like terrible twos, they want to feel in control and they want to make their own choices. There's a lot of similarities between a terrible two child and a teenager. So when you sort of keep that in mind developmentally, and you say, okay, Johnny, do you want your eggs scrambled or fried today? You choose. It's a similar thing. You just have to create contained options that would be amenable to the kid.
Thank you for that, Lenore. Thanks for jumping in. So it looks like we are running out of time. We're at 2 o'clock now. Thank you everyone for joining. For those of you who are new to ELEM, I hope this has given you some information about the organization and what we do. Feel free to go to our website, elem.org. All our social media handles are also in this chat over here, so feel free to follow us on Instagram, social media, Facebook, Twitter. It's all there in the chat. We would love to keep you abreast of future events that we have planned. And, there's also lots of opportunities for collaboration. As you see, we are experts in the field of at-risk youth. We just had an event recently with Covenant House where we were speakers on a panel, and we definitely are more than happy to do that in the future. So if someone here is from an organization that has a similar mission, do reach out. We are open to that. And yeah, there's so much more to say about this small but incredible organization. But I guess you'll just have to go to the website and hear about it. Aside from our hands-on work, we do have advisory roles. We advise the government, we advise the UN, and yeah, we are doing amazing things. We're saving lives in Israel, which is incredible. And the Israeli youth is more secure with ELEM around than not. So thank you to everyone who works at ELEM, volunteers, staff, our board, our wonderful board members. I see some of them here. And thank you, Dr. Zeccola, for participating and co-partnering with us on this. And we'll be in touch with everyone. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. Take care of yourself. It all starts with yourself. Self-care, so we can take care of others. Be well. Thank you.